Good day, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Scrum Pulse. My name is Mark Noneman with Agility Software. Scrum Pulse is a monthly or somewhat nearly monthly webinar that's sponsored by Scrum.org. And today we're here to listen to Ravi Verma, who's going to talk about building self-managing teams. Let's talk a little bit first about Scrum Pulse itself. And that is, again, free. It's approximately monthly. And you can register for Scrum Pulse and also suggest topics. It's very much community-driven. We're looking for you to tell us what you'd like to hear about at scrum.org/scrum-pulse. This session and all other Scrum Pulse sessions are recorded, and they'll be made available online on the Scrum.org YouTube channel, and you can see the link there. Of course, Scrum.org has a mission to improve the profession of software development. And one of the three key things that we're trying to do with Scrum Pulse in order to further that mission is to increase the focus on empiricism as a fundamental principle of agility. Also making sure that people are focused on building a capability to continuously deliver business value. And as, again, all of these are focused from the principles of Agile, building trust and respect between the business and the IT organization. And of course, we want them to work together daily in order to deliver that value. A little bit on logistics today for the Scrum Pulse. Currently, you are muted. We're going to go through the presentation first. We found that that works best. We encourage you to ask questions during the discussion section of the Scrum Pulse, and you can do that in a couple of ways. First of all, you could tweet your questions with the @scrum.org indicator and also the hashtag ScrumPulse. And we'll be monitoring those during the discussion, and we'll add that to the question list for Q&A at the end. You can also, or instead, type your question into the chat window in the current webinar session that you've got in GoToMeeting. Again, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session. We're going to move directly into the presentation now. Ravi Verma is an entrepreneur, an Agile coach, and also an Agile trainer. He's the founder of SmoothApps, and he calls himself an org whisperer. I've known Ravi for several years now, and he's quite an accomplished individual, very talented. 16 years he's been in the software delivery and consulting business with a variety of large companies. You can see them listed here: AT&T, Cisco, Avaya, Hewlett-Packard, Siemens. He has a bachelor's in computer science and a master's in entrepreneurship with a variety of certifications from Scrum.org. He is not only a Scrum trader, but also an evidence-based management consultant and an expert in change management, personality conflict, and motivational speaking. And I'm going to turn it over to Ravi now, and he can continue talking about building self-managing teams.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Welcome to this session. Quick overview about some of the topics that we're going to cover in this session today. Some of these questions have always been of interest to me. So what are self-management, motivation, and engagement? Are they synonymous or are they interrelated? What do you think is the level of engagement in our industry today? And is there any correlation between that and financial impacts? Because motivation sounds good, like, you know, motherhood and apple pie, but most of us are in for-profit companies. Why would anybody spend time and money if it does not have any correlation with the outcomes of a profit-making enterprise? And then we dive a little bit deeper. We start peeling the onion and say, okay, now that we understand self-management, what causes it? What causes work to be engaging? And let's connect the dots with agility and Scrum. And is there something inherent in Scrum that may help create these elements? And most importantly, once we understand the model, what do we do if it's not working? What if we are part of a team that is disengaged? Or more importantly, what if I myself am disengaged? Is there some way that I can now apply this model to make things better so that it ceases to be just some theoretical knowledge, but now it becomes a practical skill? So before we dive in, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And the story is about a vacation that, you know, my wife and I took a couple of years ago. and we decided to visit the beautiful Puerto Rico, U.S. territory of Puerto Rico. And my wife is good at finding good deals, so I think she went to Cheap Caribbean, found a great deal, and we made a reservation at the Rio Mar Beach Resort. Amazing place in Puerto Rico. So anyway, we take a flight, we go there, and we ask around, we ask the concierge and other folks, hey, what do you think we should see now that we're here? And one of the things that was, one of the places that was the most highly recommended was the Kamui caves. So we said, fine. One day we decided, let's go to the Kamui River Cave Park. So we drove across and we went to the Kamui caves and really enjoyed it, and we came back. And as we came back, we ran into a good friend that we made on our visit there, and his name was Edwin Yulfo, one of the most inspiring people I've met in my life. Now, Edwin was kind of bellboy helping guests in the lobby and with whatever needs we had. One of the things about Edwin that I found very unique and very inspiring was that whenever we had any questions during our visit, he was always there to help us. So for instance, my wife and I are not very good in time management, so most of the time, if we had to join a tour or we had to go somewhere, we would be scrambling at the last minute so that we wouldn't miss a bus or a boat. And as we were leaving the hotel, we would have a map in our hands, the directions from the concierge or maybe from Google Maps, and we would run into Edwin and we would just ask him, hey Edwin, we really need to get to this place on time. We have some directions, but we just want to make sure with you that this is correct, nothing's changed. And most of the times, or many times, Edwin would say, hey, wait a minute, I don't think this is the latest copy. Let me go get a fresh copy or a more recent copy for you. Or he would point us in the right direction, tell us some things which were not mentioned in our instructions or directions. And one day, my wife and I in the evening, we were ready for dinner, and my wife wanted to taste some authentic local cuisine, and she's a vegetarian. So as we were going out, we asked Edwin, hey Edwin, can you recommend any Puerto Rican restaurant? And he said, yeah, sure. So what he did was he actually picked up the phone, he called a friend who worked at a restaurant, and he asked him, tell me what's on the menu today and what kind of vegetarian dishes do you have? Because he wanted to make sure that my wife had a good experience, that she tasted good, authentic vegetarian Puerto Rican food. So his friend at the other end of the line told him what vegetarian dishes were on the menu, and then Edwin was actually translating and describing the dish to my wife. I think it was zango and malango, there's some fritters. So he actually describes the dishes to my wife, and he asks her, would you have a good meal if this was served to you? And my wife said, yeah, this sounds awesome. So he makes a reservation for us, he gives us the direction, and we go to the restaurant, and we had a really good time, And so on the way back from the Kamui caves, we meet Edwin, and what had happened in the Kamui River caves was that we had a guided tour, and as we were wrapping up, throughout the tour, we could hear the sound, some kind of a sound, and we didn't know what it was. So as we were waiting for the bus to take us back, we asked the guide, what exactly is this sound? And the guide said that this sound is coming from a very small frog which is native to Puerto Rico. It's called the cocuy, and you can see a picture there. And we said, hey, can you help us see this frog? And maybe we can take a picture, take it back home, show it to other people. And the guide said, no, it's the size of a thumbnail, and it's impossible for you to see this. No, I can't show it to you. It's too small. Who knows where it is? So we said, fine. So anyway, so we come back, and in the lobby, who do we bump into but Edwin, and we're just chatting with him, and we say to him, hey Edwin, you know what, we went to Kamui, we saw the frog, and in fact I think we can hear that sound here itself in the lobby, but our guide said that there's no way you can see it, and so it would have been really cool, but we understand it's the size of a thumbnail and it would be like finding a needle in a haystack. But Edwin, this is where Edwin did something which I thought was really remarkable. So what you are seeing on your screens now is the picture of the lobby, and you can see, or the driveway of the hotel. It's a pretty large area. But Edwin said, I'm going to make sure that you find this frog here. I can hear it, and I'm going to make sure that I can actually show it to you guys. And for me, I didn't think he could do it, but he actually started walking from one end. You can see the arrows. He started from the left extreme, and he started looking at the plants, at the walls. Then he crossed the road, he went to the walls, and finally he actually found the frog. And this is the picture that my wife took. So Edwin actually looked. He did not rest until he found that. And my wife was very happy, and we had a good experience. But you can see how small this frog is and how large that driveway was. So it was pretty interesting for me. So I started thinking about motivation. What motivates human beings? Edwin was probably a minimum wage worker, but still he was extremely engaged. He was motivated, and whenever we asked him a question, he didn't really call up his boss or talk to his boss and ask him, hey, what do I do now? Because I'm sure that not all of these situations or questions are part of some kind of an employee training or employee handbook, right? So I started thinking, here is a person who's probably on minimum wage, who is so engaged, so motivated and self-managing. What would it be like if our Scrum teams were full of people like Edwin, highly engaged, motivated, self-managing? And I'm not talking about the compensation here. How can we get there? How can we build a team like that? And more importantly, I wanted to unravel these terms, which sometimes I have been guilty of using synonymously or interchangeably. And those terms are engagement. What is engagement? What is motivation? Are there different types of motivation? And what is self-management? And is there any interconnection between these elements or these ideas? So I started doing some research, and one of the books that I read on this topic is displayed there. It's called Intrinsic Motivation at Work by Ken Thomas, and that book is really the foundation of this presentation that I'm giving here today. So what Ken Thomas says is that engagement is the degree to which people actively self-manage in their work. So engagement and self-management are interrelated but distinct. They are not interchangeable. So we start building a causality or a chain between these different ideas. So what that says is that when there is engagement, when people are engaged, then they start actively self-managing their work. Okay, great. So we have a definition and the interrelationship between two of these terms. So now let's dive deep into engagement. I think I have the wrong graphic. I don't think that's the kind of engagement we're talking about here. So when people are engaged, they are fully involved and they are enthusiastic in the work that they're doing. They care about the organization. They want to further the organization's interests. And they do have some kind of a positive emotional attachment to the job, to their colleagues, to their company. And they have the willingness to learn and perform. And engagement is not interchangeable with satisfaction, motivation, or culture. They are interrelated, but they are not synonymous. So, okay, so I started getting a better feel for what engagement is. And I started thinking about motivation. What is motivation? So, of course, motivation is the desire to do things. It's the difference between, I wake up in the morning and I'm really charged up. I can't wait to do things that I have planned for the day. Or if I am demotivated, then maybe I'm just lazing around the house all day because nothing really calls me, nothing makes me feel like getting out of bed, right? So the degree of motivation is very crucial in our ability and our desire to set and attain our goals. And we can influence our motivation. So it's something that, if you have a dial, there are certain things that you can do that can influence the motivation. And that's part of the talk or the presentation that we're going to discuss here. And there is an interesting point about motivation, that there are two kinds of motivation. You have extrinsic motivation. This motivation doesn't necessarily come from the work that you're doing, but it comes from what happens after you do the work. So maybe if I do a good job, I'm going to get my paycheck. I'm not going to get fired. I'll get a good bonus. I'll get a promotion. I'll get some perks. Extrinsic motivation is extremely important, but it has to be complemented by other elements. So if we are relying solely on extrinsic motivation to motivate a person or a group of people or even ourselves, chances are that it will encourage or foster just compliance with rules or some kind of repetitive behavior. Now, on the other hand, if we complement extrinsic motivation with intrinsic motivation is the joy, the happiness that you get directly from the work that you're doing. You kind of go in the zone when you're doing this work. You're not really you don't particularly care about what's going to happen afterwards. You're having so much fun and you're getting a positive boost from the work itself. And it creates a sense of pride and accomplishment in doing the work. And when you have people who are intrinsically motivated, they take a lot of initiative and they are committed to getting the desired results. So the key point that I want to make here is that I do not in any way want to invalidate any one kind of motivation. I just wanted to raise awareness that, look, there are two kinds of motivations, and for us to have a healthy organization, we must have a healthy balance between both of these and not rely exclusively on one kind. Okay, so if you rely just on extrinsically motivated people, it's possible that they will only do the bare minimum that checks the box. And if they feel, or let me just use the first person, if I'm only extrinsically motivated, I may just do the bare minimum that won't get me into trouble. And if you're watching me, then maybe I'll put on my best behavior. And if you're not watching me, being human, if I'm not intrinsically motivated, I might cut some corners if I feel that I can get away with it. On the other hand, if I'm both extrinsically and intrinsically motivated, it doesn't matter whether anybody is watching me or not. I'm not cutting any corners. I'm proud of what I'm doing. I want that positive emotional boost. I want a sense of accomplishment, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to meet the organization's goals and to meet my team goals. So now we start expanding that linkage that we have. So at the bottom of the screen, you will see that the third kind of link in this chain is starting to emerge. So if I'm motivated extrinsically as well as intrinsically, I'm going to get engaged, and if I'm engaged, then I'm going to start demonstrating higher degrees of self-management. Okay, so let's pause now that we've established this kind of link, and let's start looking at the state of engagement in our industry today. So this is a survey from Towers Watson, and what this survey says is that 4 in 10 employees are highly engaged, which is great. 4 people are showing initiative, doing whatever it takes, but a quarter are disengaged, about 24%, and 36% feel unsupported or detached. So maybe they're on the fence. You know what, I could go either way. So disengaged employees, maybe they could potentially even do something that might damage the company or the clients, and detached employees, maybe they do just the bare minimum. So what this is showing us is, now that you add it up, it's a little bit alarming that a full 60% of employees are not highly engaged in meeting the business goals or taking care of our customers, and that can be alarming. So as you start watching this presentation or listening or thinking, I'd like you guys to kind of introspect and reflect, and maybe talk to your colleagues after this presentation and ask around, where do you think your teams are today? And what evidence or what indicators do you guys use to reach that conclusion or that hypothesis? Interesting questions. Every organization has a different culture. I don't know what the answer will be, but I'm reasonably sure that if you engage in this inquiry individually and as a group, that some interesting insights might emerge. And the next question is, once you have started thinking about where your teams currently are from an engagement perspective, another thought, another question or an avenue to explore might be, okay, this is where we are, but is this where we want to be, or would we like our teams to be somewhere else? So let's talk about some of the elements or the impacts of engagement on the bottom line. So if you're working in a for-profit organization, the Towers Watson survey found that if I am working in a company which has low engagement among the employees, chances are that our net income, our profit, might be 17 to 18% lower than the profit in a company which has extremely a highly engaged workforce. So the reason that I wanted to bring this chart to your attention was that engagement and motivation, it need not just be about, something that's good or, like I said, motherhood and apple pie. There might be a direct correlation to the financial numbers of for-profit enterprise. Even if you're in a non-profit, I'm sure there are certain metrics that you guys measure. Chances are that you can have a significant bump in those positive metrics if you can figure out how to create a highly engaged workforce. So now this is the question. Let's imagine that you are a team member, or maybe you are a manager, coach, consultant, and you are part of an organization which is disengaged. How do you convert that organization, or how do you enable or facilitate that journey of conversion from disengagement to engagement, right? And that really is what we want to know here. So the model that Ken Thomas has created, and he has created like a summary booklet called the Work Engagement Profile and an assessment, and you see that on the top right. So Ken Thomas's model says that there is probably a 3 or 4 step process which helps us generate engagement and self-management. So the first step is that the team must commit to a meaningful purpose. Then they must be able to select activities that accomplish that purpose. They perform the activities, and then they monitor the activities. Say, how are we doing? Are things going well or not? And then it's not only important that the activities themselves, we get good at them, we get effective and better at them, but periodically we want to take a look at the bigger picture and see, okay, I truly believed in our company's purpose. We are getting better at the activities, and are we getting any closer to our company's purpose? Is the world better because of what we did? Is there some measurable progress towards our goal? So these are 4 or 5 kind of checkpoints, or 4 or 5 steps that one can perform to enable self-management. So the question is, what makes work engaging? So here this model says that work engagement is influenced by 4 building blocks. Now 2 of these building blocks are related to the purpose of the work. So as a team member of the company, I must feel that every day when I go into work, I'm working towards something meaningful. And what is meaningful for each individual, it's different. So what might be meaningful for me may be different from what it is for you. But you must introspect, the team members must introspect, understand their core values, and find out what kind of a company do I want to be in? How do I want to leave this earth a better place, because of me? So that is what's going to derive meaningfulness for you as an individual, and you must choose a company which has congruent values. And the second thing is you have to make progress towards that purpose. So you can have the most meaningful purpose in the world, but every day if you're not able to get closer to that, it can be very frustrating. The next 2 building blocks, they come from work activities. So I should be able to choose what activities I perform, because for instance, I may be very good at developing software, but I may not be good at marketing or sales, or vice versa. I could be good at sales, I could be good at writing. So I must be able to choose an activity that I'm passionate about and that I'm good at in service of that purpose that I believe in. And finally, I should have a sense of competence. So not only should I get a chance to do something I choose, but I should feel that I'm doing a good job and I'm constantly getting better at it. So you can also slice and dice this differently. So you can look at these building blocks vertically. So the left column, the rewards, the emotional rewards are coming from the ability to choose a meaningful purpose and to choose an activity that you like. And the right column is this positive emotional boost is coming from a sense of accomplishment, where you look back and you see, wow, we are taking baby steps towards accomplishing this meaningful purpose. We're getting closer, and I am getting better and better at the activities that I've chosen, right? So you can slice and dice this 4-quadrant view from different perspectives. If you look at it horizontally, it's about the purpose of the work. and the activities, and if you look at it vertically, it's the choice and the accomplishment. So now that we have a 4 building block model, we have choice, competence, meaningfulness, and progress, let's start peeling the onion and try and figure out what underlying elements inside an organization can enable these building blocks. So we'll start with choice, or sorry, start with meaningfulness. So when it comes to meaningfulness, one of the key elements is that the atmosphere should be non-cynical. So if we feel that, look, we are maybe for some value systems, if I'm just here to make money, and there is no correlation with a greater purpose, taking care of the client, maybe the atmosphere could be very cynical. We need to have clear values. How is it that we behave as an organization, as a company? How do we interact with each other? Is there some exciting vision about the future? So, one of the vision statements that is famous is in the early stages of Microsoft. I think one of the vision statements used to be, we want to put a PC at every desk in the world. And in those days, PCs or computers were not as prevalent, so it seemed very ambitious. But it was a big, hairy, audacious goal, and I'm sure that it excited the employees of Microsoft, and today that's a reality. Meaningfulness also comes with relevant work or from relevant work. So I must be able to draw a solid line between the work that I'm doing and the outcome that I want to generate. And finally, I must have some kind of an accountability, so I can say with pride, me or my team, we are accountable for this outcome. So I can take pride in accomplishing, I can take pride in ownership. So now let's talk about choice. So some elements that are needed for choice: authority. I should have the flexibility to choose tasks or activities that I feel I can contribute best towards. I should be trusted, so hopefully I don't have some kind of command and control micromanagement leadership where somebody is telling me exactly what to do and they're constantly checking in on me. And I should have the security to say, look, if I'm going to try something new every once in a while, I'll make some mistakes. I promise I'm going to learn from them, but I hope that I will not be penalized, because if I am, then I'll be very cautious. I may not try something new or innovative. I must have clarity about what I'm doing, and I must have access to information that will help me do the job. Now let's go to the other building block, which is competence. So I must have access to knowledge. I must have some models that can help me be successful. I should get positive feedback. When my team and I were doing good work, our skills should be recognized, and we shouldn't be complacent. We should be given some challenge, something that is a little bit harder than what we think we can accomplish, because that's where growth occurs. And standards are important. We should measure ourselves, but we should measure ourselves against ourselves and try and get better each day. So non-comparative standards. And finally, the last building block was sense of progress. So, the ability to collaborate with other people, to set some milestones so we can reflect and we can hit the milestone and feel that, yes, we are indeed making progress towards our meaningful purpose. Celebrate those wins and get access to the customer, because most of the time, if we can reduce the number of intermediaries who are acting as proxies or translating what the customer wants, there's nothing like having the team members talk directly to the customers, understanding their pain points and their challenges, and seeing the smile on the customer's face when they use something that the team has created, and see the appreciation. So customer access helps in getting a sense of progress and having some meaningful measurements. So we took the concept of kind of motivation and intrinsic motivation, and it can be a little bit abstract, ethereal, but what we did was we decomposed it into 4 building blocks, and then we zoomed in into each of those 4 building blocks, and we tried and identified at least 5 elements of each of those building blocks. How you can apply this, I'd like you to start reflecting upon this model, start looking at your own personal motivation, and on days when you're feeling extremely motivated or days you're feeling demotivated, start reflecting and see which of these 4 building blocks has caused that, and which element inside that building block could cause it. And if you want to make things better and adjust the dial, where would you focus your energies? So now let's apply this model to the story, the inspiring story of Edwin, right? So what is it that made Edwin so highly motivated? So now I got a chance to talk to him during my vacation, and for Edwin, the work purpose, what called him into action was he loved Puerto Rico. So he was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and what gave him meaning was he said, look, Ravi, I know you guys, you have most of the visitors in Puerto Rico you're probably stressed out. You have a very busy life, and you come to my place, or my land, or my my town, to get some relief and to get recharged. And my job is that I'm so proud of the beauty of Puerto Rico. My job is to help you have a relaxing vacation, fall in love with Puerto Rico. Hopefully you will come back again. Hopefully when you go back, you're going to tell other people how beautiful Puerto Rico is and send more people. And if you choose to come to Wyndham, that's awesome. But even if you don't, I just want more people in the world to enjoy and appreciate the beauty of Puerto Rico. So that's where his sense of meaningfulness is coming from. And I spoke to his boss and I said, hey, I was so impressed with Edwin. What is the magic? How do you create a guy like that? And his boss said, look, I don't micromanage. He's an exceptional person. I trust him. I respect him. There's something special about him. And I gave him the atmosphere and the environment in which he can just be Edwin. So, he had that from his boss. His boss had his back. And, from a sense of competence, he was plugged into what's happening. He had friends, and he had the confidence that he knows what's going on in Puerto Rico, and he was able to recommend to people based on their interests what activities they should do, what restaurants they should go to. And he was able to get a sense of progress, because whenever he made a recommendation and we came back with a big smile on our face and we say, hey, Edwin, thank you so much. Your directions were awesome. That restaurant was great. He got immediate feedback that, yes, he is making progress towards accomplishing his goal. So very powerful stuff, So when I was able to overlay this model on my real world experience and an actual human being, it started making more sense. Now let's try and correlate this to agile software development with Scrum. So let's zoom in on the first building block, which is meaningfulness. One of the things that inspires me about agility and Scrum is that it creates a non-cynical climate. It's not about delivering the largest amount of features in the shortest possible time with the smallest possible dollar amount. We talk about our behaviors are anchored in the Agile Manifesto. Our behaviors are anchored in the Scrum values. And if I am working on a software delivery team, or if I'm coaching someone, we use the vision statement, and this is just one of many possible examples. So you could use a vision statement, you could use a product in a box, but most of the time as coaches, as practitioners, we try to explain to team members why are we doing this and how is it that we want to do it, how do we want to behave with each other. Many times we use a planning onion so that you can establish a line or a connection between the day-to-day tasks that a team performs all the way to the iteration, the release, the product portfolio, and the company's strategy. So these are some elements of agility and Scrum that are just enabling the connection with meaningfulness. If we zoom in on the building block of choice, in Scrum, we encourage the team members to pick up the tasks. So we are giving them the authority and we are trusting our team members. And we are walking away from a command and control style of management, right? We are giving people the ability and the freedom to say, yes, you can do it, right? And we have clarity. You have information radiators, and where we are sharing the information. So at any given time, people are aware of what's going on, what is the status, what kind of inspection and adaptation can be done based on the transparency that Scrum and Agile software delivery are creating. From a competence perspective, we have our sprint reviews. We frequently deliver thin slices of functionality to our clients, and we get their feedback. so we can get a sense for, okay, are we getting better at the things that, the things that we're doing. We have cross-training. You can have pair programming or other elements or other practices that allow people to learn from each other. So you see an example of pair programming. And we do have metrics, and now it's a slippery slope. We have to use the right kind of metrics, but Scrum also talks about non-comparative standards. So, one often misunderstood metric that might be used in Scrum is sometimes people start comparing velocity across Scrum teams. Now, so if you use the wrong kind of standard, it can create unintended consequences. But if you're cautious, it's healthy to use the right kind of metrics, especially if it's outcome-based metrics and not activity-based metrics. And so finally, when you're talking about progress and collaboration, you have information radiators that can show us how we are doing in terms of our big goals. We should celebrate our small wins. Scrum has built-in avenues and events to get frequent feedback from the client, so you can inspect and adapt your work and you can get feedback from the team, so you can inspect and adapt the process of delivering software. And then you have other metrics that can show you, how well you are doing in delivering value to the business. So now, if you recap the journey that we have been on in this presentation, we started with, motivation, engagement, self-management, what is the interrelationship. We spoke about different kinds of motivation. We saw the different building blocks, and we saw which elements of Agile and Scrum are actually in support of creating the self-management. But what do I do if it's missing? So here's a very important quote that stays in my mind. A mediocre solution to the right problem is better than the perfect solution to the wrong problem. So before I jump into problem solving mode, I have to make sure that as a team we are defining and solving the right problem. And we can apply an evidence-based empirical approach to diagnosing what exactly is missing if our team members are not self-managing, if they are not intrinsically motivated. So the first thing is, if we apply the 3 pillars of empiricism, I need to create transparency. What is the current state of motivation and engagement in my team? Then I need to inspect. If the level of motivation, engagement, self-management is not what I would like it to be, what's missing? Where are the undesirable variances? And then I must be able to adapt. So wherever there is an undesirable variance in the state of engagement and motivation and self-management, with surgical precision, I must be able to make some adjustments so that we are closer to our desired goal. So one approach that you can use is you can use an assessment for motivation, and there are many assessments, respected assessments out there. One assessment that I'm familiar with is called the Workplace Engagement Profile. So it's an online assessment. It takes it's probably like a $15 assessment, which might take you about 10 to 15 minutes. It's got some multiple choice questions. But what happens is, after you finish taking this assessment, it creates this report. And it's going to create transparency into the underlying building blocks of motivation. So you have the sense of choice, competence, progress, and meaningfulness. So if we take a sample report here, if you look at this person, their sense of choice is kind of in the middle when it comes to the normative sample. But probably one thing that might be really draining their energy is that they don't get a sense of progress and they don't have a sense of meaningfulness. Why are we doing this, right? So if you were to surgically apply some course correction and adapt, chances are you want to start addressing this lack of meaningfulness and the lack of progress for this person. And if you give this assessment to an entire team, I'm sure some patterns are going to emerge when you aggregate that information. So create transparency into the current state. Once you see the current state of motivation and engagement, try to hypothesize, okay, why is this happening? What might be the reason? And start inspecting, and then adapt the environment with surgical precision. So in this model that I have shared, you can look at the 4 building blocks, find out which building block is missing, needs the most attention. And also you can complement this model with other models out there. So there is a model of the influencer book. And the influencer book talks a lot about distinguishing between ability and willingness. So if somebody is not engaged because of lack of ability, then you give them training. But if somebody is not motivated because of a lack of willingness, no amount of training is likely going to alter the consequence, because fundamentally they're not interested, right? Be a servant leader, look in the mirror. So practice what you preach. When you find your motivation ebbing and flowing, apply this model to yourself, so you will have more credibility when you coach others. And coach and be coachable, because being humans, none of us is perfect. There are times when we can coach, and there are times when we must be coached ourselves. So here's some suggestions. If you are not satisfied with the level of engagement and self-management, get somebody from the outside who doesn't have any internal baggage or axe to grind. Hopefully does not have this humongous job that is consuming them for 60 hours a week. Somebody who has expertise, and take some baby steps. You can pilot an assessment for yourself or for your Scrum team, do some kind of gap analysis, provide some coaching, and also always start measuring, is there some return of investment or some ROI? Is this approach effective or not? And if it is not effective, then inspect and adapt, apply empiricism. So as we come to a close, just a recap of what we discussed in this presentation. So self-management, motivation, and engagement, they are distinct but interrelated. According to one survey, up to 60% of employees may not be fully engaged. And I don't know what this figure is for your team or your organization, but I would encourage you to think about this and to discuss it. And according to one study, lack of engaged employees could reduce your net income by up to 18%. But there's hope. There are 4 building blocks in one of the models that can enable self-management. And what's nice about agile software development and Scrum in particular, that the Scrum roles, events, and artifacts are, they help us in enabling and building self-managing teams. So if you happen to be in a situation where there is a gap between where you are and where you would like to be, here's what you can do. Pick a survey, something that's respected in the industry, find out the gap, create transparency, inspect the current state, and then get some experts for training and coaching so you can create adaptation and use an evidence-based approach. So some recommended resources here. You can read the book Intrinsic Motivation. There are a couple of good booklets about work engagement profile. There are some good resources, Towers-Watson study. There's a Gallup study on the state of the American workplace. So you can start peeling the onion. And if you'd like to know more, I'd love to talk to you. So connect with me, talk to me, send me an email. I'm very passionate about this topic. And if there's something that I can do to help boost motivation and self-management in your organization, that is what gives me a sense of purpose and meaningfulness in my life. So I'd be happy to work with you. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Mark. And Mark, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ravi. That was a very useful, very interesting discussion about building self-managing teams. For you in the audience, we do have a question or two that have come in on Twitter. You can ask questions that way by adding the hashtag ScrumPulse to your question, and it's also helpful if you add the Scrum.org identifier. Or here in the GoToMeeting chat window, you can type your question directly, and we'll be able to get into that. While we're waiting for other questions to come in, let me start with a question from me. Ravi, based on your experience and the different companies that you've worked with, what would you say are the 1 or 2 building blocks of those 4 building blocks that you talked about that you think are the most common ones for room for improvement, the things that are missing the most in terms of the companies that you've worked with?
It's a great question, Mark. I mean, one of the most important and common gaps that I have observed, both as a coach and as a as a member of the team, is the sense of meaning or the the purpose. Why is it that we are building this software? Who is our customer? What are their pain points? So one of the recent engagements that I had, most often when a team was onboarded, they just started getting heads down into the features, the coding and designing of the requirements. But almost none of them, when I asked them, who is our customer? What are their pain points? almost none of them had any clue. They were not able to explain that. And that was a reflection not on the team members, but on us as leaders, and on me as a coach. So when I identified that, when we created some transparency, started poking around, we started inspecting and adapting. So one of the things we did was we sat down with our product owner and we created a list of maybe about 8 to 10 questions, and we videoed his answers, and we made these videos available to all our team members, existing as well as new team members, and we made it part of an onboarding training program, which is self-paced. At any time anybody can watch those videos. And we immediately saw a change in the level of conversation, because now after people had seen those videos, they had some business context and they were more inspired, because now they were coding or testing requirements in service of a person that they could visualize, and they could understand that person's business goals and pain points. So if there is one block that I find missing the most, it is that sense of purpose.
Very good. So understanding the why is very important. Great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, we have a question from Pete on Twitter. Pete says that today he had somebody, another developer, tell him today that they really just wanted someone to tell them what to do. So how would you go about advising Pete and how to address that situation? How can you kick that habit of just tell me what to do?
Yeah, different human beings have different kind of needs. So, one of my managers in my previous jobs told me that, we need to use situational leadership. There are some people who want to just be given direction. Okay, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I would probably tell that person, look, here is the outcome that we want, and here is the why. And what do you think we should do? What is your advice? Because there are times when, most of the time you are closer to the ground. You know best what needs to be done, and I need your advice in this, in this regard. I'm not sure. So I think it's hard to, give the answer about what should we do to help that person kick that habit, but a prerequisite would be, what I would do in that situation is, first I would build a strong relationship with that person. I would have lunch or coffee with them and get to know them as a human being, understand what makes them tick, what motivates them. Do they get motivation from a sense of accomplishment? Do they get motivation from a sense of choice? And if this is a person for whom choice is not a demotivator, purpose is not a demotivator, progress, we have to find out what motivates or demotivates. So for that person, maybe what demotivates or motivates them is a sense of competence. So, okay, you tell me what to do, but it is important for me that I constantly get better at that. So, and if I find that person to be demotivated, then I would kind of hone in on that and say, hey, I noticed that your energy level was low. What's going on? And maybe they will say, you know what, I just wish I could be better at coding or performance testing. And we can say, okay, hey, can I pair you with a mentor, or here's a good book, or can I send you to some training? So I guess my answer would be, find out in the context of motivation, what is the element that is missing for that person, and then provide the support that is needed to adjust that.
Great. So we got to personalize it.
You have to personalize it, and I have to resist the temptation to judge people, to say, you know what, sometimes we fall in the trap of creating this vision of an ideal person and measuring ourselves or our team members against that. To say, hey, you know what, people shouldn't be saying that. But I mean, who am I to judge? I mean, if it's working, let's find out what's demotivating them when that happens, and let me be a coach and a facilitator to help them get motivated.
Great. Thanks, Ravi. Hey, Leslie asked a question again on Twitter. Ravi, what's your opinion on letting teams work a certain percentage on features they choose? Does that improve engagement?
Great question. I would challenge the team to establish a causality between features that they are choosing and the mission of the company. So as a product owner, so in Scrum, the one person who is responsible for delivering value to the business is the product owner. And the product owner, as you know, we are taught in the professional Scrum product owner training courses, is the chief value optimizer. So if the team has come up with this awesome idea that is in service of the company's mission, and if they can influence the product owner and say to the product owner, hey, I think this can create value, I'm all for it. But I feel that we must not lose sight that in all organizations, we exist in service of a greater purpose. And when giving people options and flexibility so that we can motivate them, I feel that one must not lose sight of that purpose. So if it's aligned with the purpose, go for it. But watch out for that slippery slope where, you know, we are spending investor money on things which are not necessarily aligned with the investor objectives and the core purpose of the company.
Good. All right, so it's great for them to pick features they want to work on that they're passionate about, but it needs to be toward that motivational part of why are we doing this?
Absolutely.
What's most important to the strategy?
Right.
Great. I have another question here. This is almost the opposite of Pete's previous question. I have a client who has someone on their team who is very, very productive individual, but they really don't work well on the team. They kind of go off and do their own thing. They get a lot done, but it's actually demotivating for the other members of the team in the sense that it's hard for them to self-manage because this one person kind of goes off and does what they want to do on their own. Product owner in some sense is happy about this because they get a lot done, but it's not really building a self-managing team. Based on that, and using the 4 blocks that we talked about here, how would you relate back to that person and maybe the team at large to help them understand the need to work together as a team?
That's a great question. So I would probably relate it to a couple of the blocks. The first is the meaningfulness, and part of meaningfulness comes from the what, what and the why. Why are we doing this? But part of meaningfulness also comes from how. So I'm not in favor of a culture where the ends justify the means, right? So we talk about the Scrum values, and the Scrum values talk about respect and about openness. And so part of our social contract, I hope, would include adhering to the Scrum values and treating each other with respect. And so the culture should be, hey, you might be great as an individual, but it's not that is not the only criteria that we are using. And the second thing is, let's take a step back and let's talk about financials or whatever metrics are being used to figure out whether the team is delivering value or not. So let me walk in the shoes of the product owner. Let's conduct an experiment. So there is a hypothesis that the team can deliver more value if you have more teamwork, as opposed to you have this lone wolf, like a superstar, right, who's going off and doing something by themselves. So one of the ideas behind Scrum is, it's, the wisdom of the crowd, that all of us, the wisdom that we have, if we sum the wisdom of all of us, it's better than the wisdom of any one individual. So what if we try an experiment and say, hey, you know what, we've done things this way for a while, and the results seem to be good, where this one person goes and does whatever they want, but other people seem to be a little bit demotivated. What if we try maybe for a few sprints, or at least one sprint? What if we try the opposite, and we try a way where we work together as a team, and let's see the results and let the data speak. So if it turns out that the entire team can deliver more value together collaboratively by following the Scrum values than just this one person working alone, now we have some evidence which is based in actual business results. So I would encourage people to try that experiment, learn from it, discuss it in the sprint review, sprint retrospective, and inspect and adapt.
Very good. All right, so find ways to to help them understand how they contribute to the team to deliver even more than they can deliver on their own. Very good.
Right.
Well, we're about out of time. That's all the questions that we had right now. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and also to remind you that this Scrum Pulse webinar that we have every month or so is sponsored by Scrum.org, and the mission of Scrum.org is to improve the profession of software development. Hopefully you've learned something today to help you build self-managing teams that can deliver even more than the collection of individuals you might be used to. Again, thank you for joining us today. Ravi, any last words for the audience?
Not at all. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the awesome questions. And I hope that this has given you some insights to boost the level of self-management on your teams.
Great. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Make sure and tell your friends that if you got something out of this webinar, they can see the recording of that at the Scrum.org website. And you'll find it under the Resources tab there at Scrum.org. Once again, thank you very much.